Welcome to NOCLIP, the podcast that's like a book club for people who don't think that books reward them enough for being good at them. I'm Chad Ruthermond.
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
And today, we're going to be talking about Outer Wilds Echoes of the Eye DLC. A DLC that was developed by Mobius Digital, published by Annapurna Interactive, and released in 2021 on Windows, Xbox One, PS4, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and the Switch.
But first, if you give us a like or a rating, it would be greatly appreciated.
So yeah, this is the final episode. Also, everyone in the comments, welcome us back from vacation. We were on vacation.
Wow, good to be back. Good to be back.
Yeah, it was a great time, and we took it at the most sensible time, right in the middle of the DLC theme, so that everyone forgot what we were doing.
Uh-huh. We had to download the DLC to Life, which was a vacation.
It was like cool vacation,
a nice expansion
in Florida. Yeah, it was great. But now that if you go back a few episodes, you'll note that they were also DLCs, and this too is a DLC. And of the DLCs that we've played, I would say almost assuredly the most inscrutably difficult to access. At least if you just go in without reading anything, even what is provided by the developers, like I did.
Yeah, especially after, like, it's been so long since we played the original. Yeah. Like, jumping back in, I was like, oh god, like, I had to relearn how to fly the ship. Like, getting to the DLC, like, boarding the stranger, took me, like, 6 attempts before, like, I didn't crash into the sun.
I think it was 3 for me, but just figuring out where to go took me like a full hour.
Yeah. I forgot the autopilot existed and, like, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, one great thing that I think we should definitely start with, and is not a stupid thing to start with, no siree, Bob, is on the first episode, right after the break, that we had a conversation. Come back with us to a time long past. We left the recording room because we recorded in the same room at the time, and went and we're sitting out in a different room with an air conditioner on, probably. And talking a little bit about what we hadn't covered or whatever. And it came up that I just like never used the landing cam. And it's been sort of a running joke in our lives ever since that point that I would just smash the ship into the planet and hop out. So my favorite part of the DLC is that there is functionally no punishment for just slamming the ship into the docking station every time and hopping out in 2 seconds flat. And I did do it every single time that I got on the stranger. It was great. It felt very liberating.
Old habits die hard.
I absolutely refuse to relearn how to fly the ship.
I did the opposite thing where I actually got like really good at landing the ship.
That's absurd.
Yeah, like I got like really good at like actually like intentionally like landing it flat in the docking bay.
I love that image because like yeah, I can imagine because you have footage for this, right?
Yeah.
So people will see you fly in and like use the landing cam and slowly drop the thing. I didn't use the
landing cam. It wasn't because the landing cam's useful when you're landing on a spherical planet. So
I
you can like
know.
look down at the ground and know like when to engage the thruster so you don't smash into it.
Gotcha. Yeah, and then imagine the next time in the footage that you see Andy land the ship, imagine in a split mirror universe at the same time, my ship is upside down and the windshield is just completely destroyed and the landing gear's fucked up and it's just sparking crazy. Because that's what is happening. I landed and had no intention of ever leaving. So the ship was fully disposable to me.
Yeah, there are definitely no consequences this time around.
Yeah, so that's been great. But we should actually talk about how you access the DLC because it is weirdly complicated. Not really. They actually do give you some direction, but I guess, either stupid or stubborn. I'm unsure which, and didn't check it. But when you actually install the DLC, which is the first challenge, because I opened the game without the DLC installed the first time and flew to the Quantum Moon, because I thought it looked different. But it wasn't. I was just still enamored by it. Once you have it actually installed, they open up a new exhibit in the museum, which then sets you out on this like 3-part quest to even figure out what the difference is in the main game to the DLC activated version. And honestly, like, it isn't, but in retrospect, this feels like the hardest puzzle in the game. Because, like, I didn't know where anything was. And it's the reason it was hard is because I was coming back after so long, right?
Yeah, I anticipated that being the case. Like, once I booted it up and it was like, it was clear it wasn't going to tell me where to go to access it, I just looked up a guide.
Right.
Like, I didn't even try to find it myself. So, yeah, I don't know. Because I feel like that kind of stuff is, like, really frustrating to me. Like, I like it on paper, the idea of, like, oh, you have to, like, actually, like, find the DLC. But usually when you come to a DLC, as you've said, it's been a while. You don't remember where stuff is. You don't remember the controls as well as you did when you were playing it, et cetera, et cetera. So it results in you just like booting up the game to play it and instead doing nothing for 3 hours. Not 3 hours, but, you know, for like an hour trying to find it. And that's not a fun or enjoyable experience.
Yeah, I think, honestly, that is probably, if I had to, because the game, when we talked about the game, right? Like, not everyone who's played the game played it on day one. When we talked about the game, the DLC had been announced and I think was close to release, but hadn't actually come out yet. And then we spent 2 years not playing it. And then it came, and then we actually came back to it finally after a long time. And like, Outer Wilds is a game both of us liked, but going back for a DLC is like, I don't know how people quantify that generally. Like, if you play a game and enjoy it, and I realize that I'm looking at this in such a biased way because we collectively, not to mention any games that we play independently, play like 30 games a year.
Right.
And certainly not everybody is doing that. But like, when a DLC comes out for a game that I played, it's rare that I'm going to jump back into the game immediately to play it. And I think one of the biggest sort of like design elements of this game that like rubbed me the wrong way in terms of how the experience of playing it was I felt like they did not assume that. They assumed that somebody finished the game yesterday, then bought the DLC and played it. Up to and including the fact that to get the like quote unquote actual ending of the DLC, you have to complete the main game again, which I will tell you right now I did not do because I don't remember how to do it and it's complicated.
Yeah, I attempted it and got eaten by an anglerfish. And I was like, and it was midnight, so I was like, well, that was my attempt. That was good enough. I got this far and I'm proud of myself.
That's fair. Yeah, I am proud of you as well because you did.
Surprised.
That's more effort than I put
like,
in.
I looked up a guide to like remember like what to do first, and I was like, oh yeah, you go to the Ash Twin, and then you wait for the sand, and you warp to the Ash Twin project, the moon launcher. I don't remember what it's fucking called, the lunar something. Yeah. You warp there, you get the core thing, the warp drive, whatever it is. Yeah, and then like you had to fly to Dark Bramble. I was surprised once I started, like once it was jogged in my memory, like how much I just remembered everything you were supposed to do. Because it took
impressive.
It took me that many times to do it the first time that it's just ingrained in the memory.
Right. That's fair. And there's a game that I've actually played in the meantime that we've never talked about, you have not played, called Deathloop, that uses a similar mechanic where in order to finish the game, you have to sort of like there is sort of a prescribed series of steps, but like there's a little bit of wiggle room. Like the player can sort of make a plan to do things. And I kept thinking about that while I was doing the ending of this game, as opposed to the original, because I hadn't played Deathloop at the time, where it's like it's weird how I think one of them worked for me and the other one worked less well for me, and that the one that worked less well is Outer Wilds. And I think it has something to do with that. Like, it feels very much like memorization, almost like a rhythm game that you are too good at, and so you just have to memorize sort of like the muscle memory of everything and just do that very quickly because of the time limit and all of the different things you have to do. Like, the endings for both the DLC and the main game require like reasonably fast action on the part of the player, and require you to repeat them multiple times. And it didn't, like, I called the game a bad good sandwich in our first episode.
A classic.
And a classic, yeah. And I feel almost the same way, but 10 times more intense about the DLC in pretty much like every facet. Like, there are parts of the DLC that I think are fucking amazing and parts that I think are much worse than in the original game. And that, yeah, that ending, and I couldn't be bothered to go redo the ending to the main game.
The ending
again.
is very involved and stressful, so
yeah,
it's a big ask. But yeah, like I think, to respond to something you said like 3 minutes ago now, like I kind of like that they designed it like with like the idea that like you're gonna remember everything in like, because like I think you just lean in and you just go for it. Like, I feel like the DLC, like designing it for the people who really love the game, is like probably the right attitude to take. But yeah, I mean, there is. I also experienced a little bit of friction where like there's stuff about the story I didn't remember, and like context I know I was missing for stuff. But I don't know. I think it's because we talked about this on the Shadows of the Erd Tree DLC. Like, I like that this is integrated right into the main game. Like we were talking, like FromSoft never does that. It's always really separate and you warp to it. I like that this is like nestled into the main game and incorporated into the story. So yeah, for better, like there are some downsides to that, but I feel mostly positive about that.
Yeah, and I think that you're correct. Like, for what it's worth, I think that when you are making, especially to a game like Outer Wilds, like Outer Wilds is, I would say, pretty popular. Like, a lot of people do like this game. But it is not a mass market kind of game. It's just difficult to get into. It's difficult to finish. It has a lot of its best parts sort of nestled in that middle where you have to get over some friction to actually get to it. And I think that a lot of people probably get a bit turned off by that. And so when you go to make an expansion to it, it does seem like the right call to make it specifically for the people who were very enthusiastic about the original. So you are correct. I bring it up mostly as a reasoning for the friction that I had getting back into it.
Yeah.
Because I had very little, like, still inside the brain knowledge of what I did in the original game.
Yeah, and like I had a bad first experience as well. I think maybe I got over it quicker, but like the first time I booted the game up, like I just walked around for like a couple minutes before I just looked up a guide on how to get to the DLC. And then it took me like 6 attempts to actually successfully fly there. I got into the ring world, which was fucking awesome, that reveal of walking into it for the first time, which we'll come back to. And got through one cycle, felt like I found absolutely nothing of importance or significance, and died, or the loop started over, and I was like, well, that's enough for tonight. Like, it felt like it started off on such a bad foot for me. But then the second session, it felt like the pacing. I was like, oh my god, like condensing the formula of Outer Wilds down to a more like contained or linear, big air quotes, like thing makes the pacing so much better because I feel like I found so many things so fast, and I was like, oh fuck yeah. Then the second it turned right around for me, and like the second time I was playing it, I'm like, this is even better than the main game. But then it evened out. I think I like them about the same. They have different strengths and weaknesses, but
yeah. And I think you said it in a less hyperbolic fashion, but I do think that we kind of have the same thoughts on this. Like, I thought that it was difficult to get into. Honestly, not significantly more difficult to get into than the base game, but the actual exploration of the stranger in the ring and like getting to like each individual little spot, and being able to like drill down into like, okay, these things are important, and using the ship log, a thing that I famously didn't know about until like 11 hours into the main game. And then like actually like putting the pieces together and stuff. I like that stuff all. I like it more on a gameplay scale more than a lot of the stuff that you do in the base game. But the fucking main game has so much cool visual shit and like conceptual shit that I couldn't say that I liked it better in that regard.
Yeah, it just got more. It's like the content is like spread out amongst like a bunch of different things, and this is all just in one place.
Yeah, and like the ship navigation expertise is like a skill testing part of the game that is just absent in the DLC. Like that's a whole mechanic that is essentially thrown out the window and is replaced with press the left stick in, press the up button on the D-pad, and then you hop out of the ship and let it careen into the wall like I did.
Yeah. Unless you want to take the ship outside the stranger and fly in through the little explosion on the outside.
Yeah. You could also do that.
Yeah.
But I didn't ever do that didn't know that you could do that.
Oh,
so
yeah.
there you go.
There's a reel that you can find that shows that there was like an explosion on the outside of the station. So you can like fly to it and like get into like a secret. It just serves as like a shortcut essentially to the gorge area.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I do know where this is.
Okay, yeah, and it's like it's basically just like a world building thing. Like it shows you where they like built the little lanterns they use, which I got hung up on for like a weirdly long time in that room. I was like, because like there's these little pods and like they have the things where you can see their memories, like the little staffs, and it shows them like sitting down at these little fires with their little lanterns and like going off into the matrix. I was like, in the present, like the fires are out because there was a big hole into space, so the fires went out, because there's no oxygen. But then, but you can seal it back up, and I'm like, oh, I had to find a way to transport the green fire in the real world to these places and relight the fires, and there's nothing to do there other than get information. But like, I was hung up on trying to do something with it for a while.
Yeah, I found that to be, and I mean, this is probably a good way to sort of get into a more nuanced discussion of like the puzzle design and things in the DLC. I found that to be the case very often, that there were a lot of the things that I really liked about Outer Wilds, and by extension also like about the DLC, is in the exploration and gathering of information more so than I enjoy actually applying that information. The puzzling out of like what all of these things are used for is engaging to me. But then the execution on that, I always find to be very clunky and sort of like not what I'm there for a lot of the time. And case in point, you were trying to move the flame from one of the bonfires inside of the real world to the one that's in that like abandoned room.
Yeah.
And I just like did not like it took me a long time to figure out how to get to the secret world.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know how like to die or to doze off while holding the artifact. So there was a lot of me just running around with the artifact trying to do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was surprised. Like, I'm kind of the opposite. Like, I tend to like doing the puzzles more than gathering the information. Even though I agree it is often clunky and I'm kind of bad at figuring out the puzzles. Like, that's the part that I like the most.
Right.
But yeah, I was surprised how quickly I figured that out. But I was really hung up with like another amazing reveal with the first time you walk down those stairs and you see all the dead bodies just jacked into the Matrix. But which you don't know at the time. It just was like a spooky ritual. But yeah, like I kept trying to like set the artifact down, roast a marshmallow, and then stick it into the thing to transport the flame with the stick.
That's so fucking good, though.
Yeah, like because when it got to the fire and it was like doze off or roast a marshmallow, I'm like, oh, doze off. This is another thing because we haven't played the game in a while. I'm like, is that like a mechanic to like pass time faster? Like, because like I wrote that off like immediately. I'm like, it has to be something with the marshmallow, right? But then I did try dozing off. And then I figured it out.
Yeah, the doze off mechanic. This is why because you have a very good reason to not have tried dozing off. Mm-hmm. And mine is dumber because I knew that the doze off mechanic does pass time, but also was added in the DLC. If there's like a place you can go to early on near where the like satellite tower is, if you don't go in the satellite tower, instead go into the woods, there's like a note you can read that teaches you the use of the doze off thing. So what I should have been thinking was, why would they add this mechanic in? It doesn't really solve a problem that anyone had in this game. Because like the loop is 23 minutes. Like how often are you like, man, I really just gonna shave like 3 minutes off of the amount of time I have to wait for something. And that's coming from me, the most impatient person on the planet.
I was thinking like I was in that Majora's Mask headspace. Like there's like stuff that can warp to different points. I'm like, oh, maybe you need to fast forward to when the dam breaks or something. You know, like that's where my head was with it.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely like it makes sense why it would be added, but also it's like a thing that I never found myself using.
No, me neither.
So when I got to, because the first place I actually went into the secret world was in the submerged thing,
the bell.
Like the big bell. Yeah. And I swam up through the bottom of it and was like, oh shit, like, okay, hold on. And then because I had the artifact, I was like, this makes sense, because I remembered seeing a reel that showed what turned out to not be that at all, but like in my head that's what it was. It's the thing that's shown in the reel is actually the vault, the thing with that's sealed that you have to like open to get the ending.
I think it's called the vault. Yeah,
we'll call it that, and even if it isn't. But I was like, okay, they took the fire to that. And so I went under and I knew that there was a fire in there. So I took the lantern to it and I just like tried to do a bunch of stuff in there and just it didn't work. And then I tried to meditate, to leave, to start the loop over, because I was already late in the loop. And that takes you into the secret world.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think I did
that once on accident. Like I like got grabbed by a ghoulie and woke back up in the ritual room, and then tried to meditate. I was like, oh well, I don't want to do that all over again. I don't have enough time. I'm gonna meditate, and then I went back in, and that confused me. So now I know why that happened.
Yeah, so that does it, and so that sort of sparked the connection, and eventually I figured out, like, oh, if I use the doze off, the new mechanic for the DLC, that is what actually is like meant to take you in. And then I didn't learn until after finding the reel about dying that dying in the room also takes you to it, and that's like the way.
Yeah, that took me so long to make the connection. Same. Oh man, but man, that was so fucking cool though. Like you just have that moment of like, oh, duh. Like if I'm dead, the bell can't wake me up.
Right.
It all makes
And
sense now.
Yeah, see, I'm putting it all together. The thing for me that like, because I'm going to say a lot of things that are probably fucking scandalous to people who really like this DLC. I'll say I have a lot of complaints about sort of like how the other world part is structured and a lot of the things. And I think that a lot of the reason that I wasn't a big fan is because I was so late into the DLC when I got there that I just sort of had to do it all at once.
Yeah.
But the culmination of that, after you've seen all of the new slides and have like your plan to solve the puzzle for the actual ending, is like my favorite puzzle solving moment, maybe in Outer Wilds as a whole.
Yeah.
Like I really liked that part where you jump off the boat and
Yeah,
then you
God.
extinguish the light, etc.
I mean, I think we're just gonna keep jumping around, but like,
Yeah, fair enough.
Skip straight to the end. No, like, like that was.
Oh, by
such
the
a
way,
cool...
if you haven't played the game yet,
why are you here?
yeah, you were far too deep.
Because like the first time I was going through like down the river on the boat in the other world, I noticed like that you hit like a loading zone in between. It stood out to me immediately. Like that's weird. And I just like when it felt like a full circle moment when I realized like, oh, like that's a thing you have to use. Like it's like a seam, like a glitch. You have to NOCLIP out of the world. Like that was such a cool moment because I clocked that like the first time I went through it. Then in the middle-ish of the experience, I was like, oh, it's because it's like a simulated world, so like it is loading the next area because it's like, you know. So then I almost kind of wrote it off as like, oh, it was just like a world building thing. But yeah, so that revelation was really awesome. I agree.
It was great, especially the fact that like you do as like a person. I'm not going to say the G word. As a person who plays a lot of games, you do go through that and clock it as a loading zone immediately, but you're also very much conditioned to just ignore it because that's how
like such a thing that they wouldn't need to load for though.
That's fair. That's
to
fair.
me is like if like I didn't think too much on it. I to your point, I did just accept it. But like
right.
I came so close to like really being like, but wait a minute. But didn't.
That's fair. But I mean, eventually though, you see the real, you put it together instantaneously.
Yeah,
like there was no trial and error for that, which I did like a lot. Like the fact that in a game where part of the solution to like getting to the end of the game involves you like having to go around in the pitch dark and like follow a guy who it's impossible to tell is a guy until you get close enough and then they kill you and you have to do it again. Like all of these like little micro adjustments of like trying and failing, which is like the themes of Outer Wilds. Like I do understand that. He says skeptically, is the fact that one like showed up and I immediately was like, I know exactly what you're talking about and what to do and where to do it is like that. It clicked so perfectly that it just felt very satisfying to eventually do. Of course, that is 1/3 of a puzzle, and if you go do it immediately, which is what I did, you just get punished by having to start the loop over because you've now wasted a bunch of time. But interesting to note, like a thing that they did that was like, and maybe like that is just a very easy puzzle that I am just too stupid. But I think that it's a great way of like using the audience's expectations to guide them to your solution, which is really clever in my opinion. Very cool.
Speaking of the other world, the upside down, the Matrix, whatever we're going to call it. There are like, a couple of mechanics, like we mentioned, jumping off the boat, like that there are like exploits or glitches that you have to learn to get like to solve the puzzle. I was wondering if you found any of them out. It sounds like you probably didn't, but like on your own without like the reel showing you how to do it.
No, yeah. So the only one I think I would have been the death thing, like dying, and so you can go past the sentries. But I never actually. I was never both dead and in the situation where I could make use of it during a regular like run through the area. So I never found that. I wouldn't have put down the artifact.
Oh yeah. See,
to do the third thing.
Yeah, I was listening to shout out the other NOCLIP. They
nice.
have like an interview with like a podcast interview on Echoes of the Eye with the developers, 2 of them, and they said like that's like a really common thing for people to figure out on their own is putting the lantern down, and just that whole discussion. Like I didn't figure any of them out on my own personally, but like I thought like almost certainly that you would, because like I just feel like you seem like that kind of player more than me, but. I'm not surprised that you didn't either. I think it's still pretty uncommon for that to happen.
There was an opportunity for it to happen because when I got to the first, I have no idea what you call it, the first area with the new reels in it, I put like the lantern
areas.
Yeah, the secret areas. I put the lantern in the thing to use as a projector because that's like what it's for at that point. So I guess not the lantern, the artifact, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I put the artifact in the thing. I put the reel in, and then I noticed the islands behind me. So I watched the reels, and I was like, I'm gonna go check out those islands. And like, so you know how in this game, in order to jump, you have to hold the X button down and then release it, and like how long you hold it determines how much you jump.
Yeah.
A mechanic that I barely even remembered as being part of the original game, but I grew to absolutely hate in the DLC.
Well, yeah, it's because it's got the 1.3 times gravity.
Yeah,
on the ring world. So yeah, like you have to like use the jetpack, or at least I did. I used the jet in the real world. I used the jetpack constantly to jump, but you don't have it in the other world.
Right. So I was like holding the X button down to jump to one of the islands, and I was like, "Oh, can't forget my artifact," and like turned around and went and got it. Like if I had just released the button, I would have discovered that the mint green thing. But I did not get detective vision and just and turned back around. So I was very close to a revelation, but didn't quite get there on my own.
Yeah. And I like that like both experiences would be like a really cool moment, cuz like finding that on your own would like blow your mind and you'd be like, what the fuck is this? Then it would be like a mystery to figure out. But then like you get the feeling almost like learning that you can warp by praying on the golden pads in Tunic. When you find out from the reels, you're like, oh, this is a thing I could do the whole time. Like, how did I never put the lantern down and walk away from it? Like, it seems so like, and then you feel like you have to go back to all the different places and try it, etc.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you get like a cool moment either way.
I do feel like there's a lot of overlap probably between Outer Wilds fans and Tunic fans.
Oh yeah.
These are games that definitely feed sort of the same like sense of curiosity in people. So that was that is a good call out. I agree. And I do wish that I had, I mean, it always comes down to this, right? Like I wish I had more time with it. Yeah. Like there was a point where, cause you said like you tried to do the ending and failed and it was midnight. So you just
said, fuck it.
Yeah. Like I'll just, I'll watch it on YouTube or whatever. Yep. Exactly. My moment happened at like 2:30 in the morning yesterday, where I was like, I think I jumped onto the raft and missed and fell into the water, and I was like, fuck it.
Did you hate that raft?
Yeah, well, a little bit, but I definitely did some like speed run optimizations because you can like use the flashlight on it from afar and pull it. Oh, I'm talking about the spectral raft specifically.
Oh,
if you
yeah.
mean the raft that you ride on regularly,
Yeah, on the river. Yeah.
I actually liked a lot.
Okay, it seemed like the kind of thing
Yeah.
that would annoy you to me. I just imagine
there
you
was
like
a
opening.
there was a curve.
Yeah, I imagine you like opening the doors and be like, I gotta get on this fucking raft.
I think I said that exact thing out loud at least once while playing. So you are right. There was a curve for me because it's like I didn't realize until later that I was like, I could like lock in and like get good at rafting.
Yeah.
And then I liked it more. But there was a while where I was like, this fucking slow ass raft. It's so hard to steer with using the flashlight. But then like I got to the point where I was like, oh, now I'm dual coning. I don't know if that's a good way of putting it.
I know what you mean by it. So
yeah. You like take a few steps back so you're hitting two.
You can make it go faster.
Yeah. Once I like got into it, I was like, this is actually great.
Yeah.
And then also you only really have to raft like once you know the area between like the first place and the second place. And then if you need to go anywhere else, you can just enter through the elevator.
Shortcut, yeah.
Yeah. Which that's something I love in games generally. This is just like a one sentence thing. I love knowledge checkpoints where it's just like you learn something and then that's always been there and then you can skip it. I am so surprised I didn't find that hole in the wall, like the big crevice, because I thought I searched pretty well.
Yeah.
And just didn't find it.
I feel like it's a thing that's kind of easy to overlook. Because like on the slide that you see it on, it's not clear what's happening. Like I didn't recognize it as the space station. But if you go into the ship and you read the log on it, it just tells you that's what happened. It's like, oh, there was an explosion on the outside of the spacecraft.
That's true. I did use the ship log in this playthrough of the DLC, but I was not checking it that often, if I'm being honest.
And it's kind of weird because scale is strange. Because you're flying around the ship around the outside. It's like a big spinning, like the whole space station spins. And like it's like from the landing pod, it goes like up and like it's one like up to the left. There's these two things. And like there's like a hole in between them, and the hole is where the explosion happened. And like the hole, I swear, like to me anyway, does not look anywhere big enough for you to be able to fly the ship into, but you can. And it's like really weird. I did it on accident. Because like I was like, okay, like I don't see anything. Also, it's hard to see.
Of course.
And I'm like, I don't see anything. I would just like try and land on the spot where the circle is, like when I can see it the best. And then I'll jump out. And I like went to land on it, and the ship just went inside like a hole. And I was like, what the fuck happened?
That is always. It's both great and terrifying when that happens. Yeah. So that's cool. Yeah, I would have assumed from like looking at it that you should just like solo dive into it without the ship.
Yeah.
But I guess the ship just fits right in.
Mostly. I don't know if it fits all. I think you can like wedge it in.
Okay.
Kinda. It might fit all the way in. I'm not 100% sure.
So I'm thinking that you may have been right before we started recording. And that there's still a decent amount left to go on this one. So, do we want to talk about, I guess, sort of like, well, I want to talk about the overworld a lot because we didn't really.
Yeah.
And then more of sort of like the ending and stuff like that. After the break.
Hell yeah.
Welcome back. When we left, we were talking about sort of like getting into the stranger. Ignore the fact that we also already talked about finishing the game. So naturally, the next thing to talk about would be what you see when you actually get in there. And we've been calling it sort of the real world part of the DLC is so fucking beautiful and phenomenally designed, in my opinion. Like, absolutely my favorite part of the game. I think my favorite thing that happened during the whole game is that I happened to be on a roof, high up, when the first time that I was there when the dam broke.
Mm-hmm.
The first time that the dam broke, I was nowhere to be found, and was just killed instantaneously by it, which was very funny. And I didn't know what happened. I was like, what caused this? But then the second time that it happened, and the first time that I was like actually witness to it, I was so high up that I just got to watch the waves sort of like tear down a whole city in front of me. It was so great to watch. Like, it was such a great moment where I like realized what was happening, and it made me really appreciate the sort of like design of the space. Like, why is the gravity higher? Well, all of the water goes in this like small circle, which has this big reservoir at the end, and then there's like a clear moment. It's like everything that Outer Wilds, the video game, did well in microcosm. Like, there's interesting stuff happening that depends on your location and timing, and it all has like at least something there to make it make sense, which is ludicrous. Like, the amount of effort that they put into the main game, and then by extension the DLC as well, just very impressive.
Yeah, I love how much it slots. It feels like it belongs in the main game. Like,
Yeah.
like the fact that the space station is invisible is cool, because like it feels like it kind of relates to like the whole, like all the quantum stuff a little bit. And then yeah, I like that it's a ring world. Like, it's a concept that they didn't do. And like I that's one thing I really like about this developer, and why I would recommend the NOCLIP documentary. Is like I think they're really like, I like the way they talk about like developing around like these concepts, right? Like, they have like the Ash Twin and Ember Twin is such a cool idea. And then there's like the Giant Steep. Yeah, like where it's like they wanted a planet where you could like fly off of it. And like, you know, like Brittle Hollow, which is like there's nothing on the outside and all the content's on the inside, and et cetera, et cetera. Like, there's all these cool ideas. Yeah, so I think the ring world fits right in. Yeah, and like the dam breaking is such a cool element too. Like, it fits in with the time loop. It's like a marker of like the time that's progress, and it also changes the environment. There's also like I don't know exactly what's going on like in lore, but like there's a part like where like the whole space station like flickers, like it glitches. Yeah. And like I'm sure there's an explanation. I never figured out why that happens or why the dam breaks. I assume there's a solution. I the first time it happened, I didn't, I wasn't looking at it, obviously.
Right.
But like, I was so certain like there was going to be a thing that happens that causes it. Like, when I got there, like an observable thing. But as far as I could tell, there isn't one. But,
right.
Yeah. But anyway, regardless of that, yeah, so cool. Like, I think like the concepts feel like they are right at home with everything else in the base game.
Yeah, I think, and like people probably know these things at this point. Like, the DLC's been out for for years.
Yeah.
So definitely, like, we're speaking from a place of like having just played it and haven't looked anything up. But like, my inclination would be to look at like what's happening in the larger world to determine like what causes the things to happen at the times that they do. Like, maybe there is a connection that I've just either forgotten or never saw, that actually corresponds with something. Like, what flies by the stranger when you go by.
Right.
Maybe the flickering is like when it is at that point that you see in the photograph where it goes in front of the sun, and like there's like a electrostatic interference or something. So there's like lots of possibilities, but it is exactly the kind of thing that Mobius did in the original game as well, where just like things would happen and it would be up to the players to figure out like why it is, if it even matters to them. Like, Just very cool. Also, in terms of the flickering, I will do you one worse. The opposite of doing you one better, where it took. It was such a long period of time before I thought that it wasn't just me, the human being playing the video game, blinking weird. Like it would happen, and I'd be like, "Did something just happen?"
That doesn't even make any sense.
To me, like it manifested as just sort of like the game dimming, like everything. Like I don't think I ever saw anything that I would have referred to it as a glitch.
Oh yeah, like
it just would have been like flickering,
like at the windows, like up above, like where you can see out into space. Like they flicker with like panels, like you can see that it's like an energy field, like it all like flickers.
Yeah, did not ever see that happening. I always just saw like a lighting disturbance.
Yeah, the lights flicker, like literally flicker.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, I just like blinked weird. I wasn't paying attention to what was happening well enough that I just like never even noticed it. But I realized that it was happening at like the same time each loop, and eventually I got wise. I was like, there's something going on here, but I just never really knew what it was. So yeah, agreed though. All of like the cool synchronous events are put to good use here, I think, to a similar degree. I don't think anything in the DLC or in any exploration video game ever made is going to be better than the Ash Twin Ember Twin situation, the exploration, the puzzle solving, the like actual story revelations, and also just conceptually is one of my favorite things ever put to the screen. I don't know why, I just love it a whole lot.
I mean, it is awesome.
It's super awesome. But I do think that they do a very admirable job of like maintaining that same sense of like mystique in the DLC. So I did love it for that.
Yeah, and speaking of like the dam breaking, one of my favorite moments, like to kind of switch gears here, is inside the other world. When you go in, and I think it's called like the lower wood, like swamplands, or like the lower riverlands or something in the spaceship.
Lowlands,
the river lowlands,
maybe
that's what it is. In that section, like the other world section there, where you go in and there's like the mansion where they're playing the music, that section, like figuring out that like you had to go in from a different spot and ride the boat there so that you can wait for the dam to break to kill all of them, but it wouldn't kill you because you weren't in the same spot and your body was not, wiped out killed by the water, so that you could like get into the secret fireplace elevator, was like also one of my favorite moments, like one of my favorite puzzles, because I was like, oh right, like I can wait for them to get killed by the water. Like it's like that was, I think, like the moment where like it was like a pivot moment for me, where like I really started to understand everything that was happening a lot more than I had previously. When I figured that out.
That's definitely one of those things that I'm more half and half on, because I do really like the implementation of it, but it does make, it makes me think, this is dumb, and honestly, it should just be a positive. I think this is a good thing that they did that I like a lot. It breaks my immersion slightly, because I'm always thinking like, whenever like the first time I was in the situation, I had actually gone in from the tower.
Oh yeah.
Like the first time that the dam broke and like it jostles the world. And so I had this like knowledge in my head that like, okay, because it's very clear when you're in the secret world when the dam breaks. And I was like, so if I'm in here when the dam breaks, I won't be busted out and sent down the river. like I was the last time that this happened. And so I was able to put that together before I got in there. But it does always just make me a little bit mad to think about going in and doing all of the steps required to get to the fireplace and then having the dam break and then you have to do it all again.
Yeah. I think, like, I was thinking this on the first half when we were talking about some of our frustrations. And, like, I think there is more opportunity for frustrations because it's a more limited amount of things that you're able to do in this DLC as opposed to the main game. Like, if you're doing something in the main game and you're, like, getting frustrated by it, you can go do with something else and come back later, where with this, there isn't as much opportunity for that. So, yeah, you do end up with stretches where, like, you're going in, you're getting on the boat, you're grabbing the artifact, you're, like, going into the ghost realm, and, like, you know, to just, like, doing all these steps to try, like, one little different thing that you don't know if it's even going to work. So, there's definitely moments like that are kind of frustrating.
Yeah, I think that the time loop element of Outer Wilds, the video game, is like it's one of its defining features just based on design alone, but also I think a very good thing that it does. I think it allows the game to both feel very expansive while also limiting its actual scope. So you can go and do, you know, that nothing will take you more than 20 minutes to do. Because if it does, the game ends. And so even the most complicated thing that you do in the main game, which is finish it, up until the point where you actually go into outside of the loop at the very end, all has to fit within that time frame. And so it is less daunting in a way to get everything done because you know that it can't be that expansive. Mm-hmm. In the DLC, I found that I was much more frustrated by the time loop than I was in the main game because I was almost never dying. So not never, obviously. I died quite a bit. This is a lethal game. You just die if you fuck up a little bit, a lot of the time. But I was dying a lot less often in the DLC than I was in the main game. And so I found myself actually hitting that time limit and being sent back. And to me, like, it felt less like you hit on, I think, the exact reason why. It's just like you have to go through a lot of steps to get back to where you were before you can try things again. And yeah, and that's why I found that, like, I almost wish that because we were in this, like, ship that maybe we would be free of the time loop for once.
Yeah, the first time the first time I sat down to play, I went into the ring world, and then the time loop ended, and it sent me back. I was like, oh my god. I'm gonna have to, like, fly to the satellite and, like, ride along with it till I can see the stranger, and then fly to it again. And, you know, then I turned the game off. But then when I booted up the next time, and whatever your friend sitting by the fire's name is, it's like, hey, you can mark things on your map. And I'm like, oh god, thank god we can just mark where the stranger is.
Yeah, we did not mention that in the first half, and absolutely should. What a good choice.
Yeah,
to not have to wait every time.
Yeah, best of both worlds. Totally worth it to have you discover it the way you do, but then have you not have to do that ever again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, oh, couldn't this DLC just have not had the time loop? Was a thought that I had. For sure. But yeah, I found myself in the main game never, or at least to my memory, like almost never meditating till the next loop. Whereas in the DLC, I did it all the time because it would be like I would get through a thing and be like, oh, I fucked this up. I'm not gonna have enough time to go do another thing. Like I have to just meditate till next loop. But yeah, in the base game, you don't really ever have to do that.
Right. Also in the base game, that you always have the option of just flinging yourself into the sun.
That's true. Yeah, it's a lot easier to just kill yourself.
Yeah. So the meditation did definitely come more in handy this time around.
Yeah, you can just Groundhog Day it.
Yeah.
Just kill yourself in a million different ways.
That's an example of a mechanic that was introduced in the base game that I think becomes more useful in the DLC, as opposed to the jumping mechanic, which I find unfathomably annoying now in the DLC. And things that I would have never even thought about. Like, you know how like every time that you go through the secret door, you have to take those lanterns off?
Oh, yeah.
The platform? Boy, do I hate that you can only put them down in certain places.
Yeah, like you had to like look straight down at the ground. Yeah, that could have been smoother.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like,
And it's like,
or like just let
wouldn't
you
have
move
ever
it.
thought of it.
Yeah, like I understand like there's reasons why they don't let you hold more than one thing at a time. But like, man, like the fact that you have to put the artifact down and then pick up the lanterns one at a time does get pretty annoying.
Yep. And it's like, these are the things that like, it's like, I understand that the game cannot go without the time loop. Like, that is the central conceit. Yeah. The dam breaking doesn't work. The apparently the glitched panels don't show up. All kinds of things like break.
Blink weird if there was no time loop.
The players wouldn't blink weird. Gotta have that. But like if this had been separate, like as a fully different thing, like accessed from a different menu, taking place at a different time, obviously would change the story. There's a lot. I'm not arguing that this is a good thing, but it brings into contrast these other decisions that were made with the base game's exploration in mind, and in my opinion, like, doesn't do that much to hurt like the overall DLC experience, but does show the like limitation in this design by setting it within the other game. Not that I think it's a necessarily super bad thing, but it is the thing that I wish had cleaner solutions than what we actually have. Because, like, yeah, you 100% would not have ever even noticed that you have to, like, put stuff down in a specific place on the ground in the base game.
Because you don't do it as often?
And you would have never complained about it even if you did notice.
Yeah.
I don't know me. I might have complained about it.
Yeah.
But in the DLC, we both were a little annoyed by it.
Yeah.
Because you have to do it a whole bunch of times.
Yeah, you pick up those lanterns like 200 times, so.
It gets very, very old, I'll say. So, yeah. I think that's kind of my big thing.
Yeah. Speaking of the base game, one thing you do a lot in the base game is you read my like journals and writings and stuff, and that's completely absent in this. It's actually a really effective thing when you first get to the station and you walk up to some writing on the wall and you pull out your little translator and it's like, don't know that language. Nope.
Yep.
And it's everything. You learn all the information visually. And I know we've talked about this on the podcast before, but like I'm more of a visual learner and you're more of like a verbal. Yeah. So I was just wondering if like you clocked that or if you thought about that difference of like delivering the story visually versus through text.
I did. I don't see, in my mind, I don't see like that much of a difference necessarily between text written on the wall, like the language in the original game, versus like the slides, like the actual like the fucking Viewmasters that you do to get the story in this one. But I definitely noticed the that I was ignoring a lot of things more so than I did in the main game. Like I feel like I had a more comprehensive understanding of the like the other characters in, like, to the point where I made a point of it on the first podcast that we did. I was like, I felt like these characters were more well fleshed out that are all written versus the characters who were like in the actual world. I felt more distant to them because I thought that they lacked sort of a voice. but in this one, I'm like, there's no differentiation to me between all the elk men.
Right.
Like, they're all the same. They kind of are more monstrous.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was difficult for me to empathize in the way that I did in the base game, weirdly. And I think that, yeah, it does owe a lot to the fact that I just engage less with visual storytelling than I do with text-based.
Yeah, and for me, I wouldn't say it was like the exact opposite, but like I found, because like I wasn't like in my mind relating it to like the characters as much, but like I just feel like I understood and retained like the backstory and like the things that were happening way better in this than in the base game. That's partially because there's just more. There's like a lot of text to read in the base game, so you're gonna forget some of it. But I think I just kind of like retain those like visuals more personally. But that's ground we've trod on before, so no one was surprised.
That's true, yeah. Do you remember the puzzle where you, speaking of me, not necessarily being not a visual learner, but more of somebody for whom visuals, meaning seeing things with your eyeballs, is not always a given. Do you remember the puzzle? And I swear this does lead into something that's bigger than this.
Okay.
Where you shoot the scout into a room to get the code for the door off of what looks like a bistro menu. I had so much trouble reading and remembering that, and was like, oh, of course, after you take the photo of it, it stays on the top right of your screen. So I can get the photo, walk up to the thing, and then literally stand up and walk as close to the screen as I can so that I can read from the photo the symbols and then put that in the code. But then when you go to interface with the door, it takes a picture off the screen. So you have to then leave, and like I just wrote it down as like sun, spark. Like I gave names to the symbols and like tried to figure out how to do it. I thought that this game hated me for having a hard time seeing stuff, because then it goes from there into the secret world where everything is just fucking black. I don't know if you had difficulty with that.
No, but like pro tip, this is a thing I do in like all these kind of games with like visual puzzle elements. Just walk up to the screen and take a picture of it with your phone. Like I still have it in my photo album. So yeah, the combination was sun. I was calling it a gravity symbol for some reason. It's like a weird like kind of circle thing. Flame, gravity symbol, flame. Like that's the combo to that door. I know exactly which one you're talking about.
I thought I did not take any photos at all.
But yeah, that's something I always do. Like if there's like a visual puzzle like that, I'll just take pictures of it with my phone. So yeah, so that I can just like have it in my hand and just look at it when I need it.
That would have been that's definitely a good thing. There are a lot of things, like there's there were a bunch of different like things that had those same like symbol key codes on them that required and like I don't even necessarily know that there were any other ones that you actually had to like solve in the traditional sense.
No, I think they end up, which is this is another thing. Like there was a point in the game where like I almost thought I was going to have to throw in the towel and just like look up what to do next. Because yeah, it was like I assumed like when the first time I got into the other world inside the bell, found the vault and the code inputs, that I was going to have to find the 3 codes, and then you just don't. Like they just aren't in the game. So I was like, well, I tried everything I could think to do. I still haven't found any of those codes. Like I don't know what to do next. I'm out of like threads to pull. I eventually figured it out. I don't know what I stumbled upon. But yeah, like so yeah, I think that ended up just being a red herring, which is kind of weird.
Yeah. Or there's like some kind of fucking the Shadow of the Colossus crazy treasure hunt situation where there is a code, but
but you just don't know how to get to it. Randomly guess them eventually.
That's a good point. More likely, you have to remember it is 2024. Somebody could just go into the game's files and figure out what the combinations are, which is something I tend to forget people do all the time. But yeah.
Before we get too far away from it, you mentioned that inside the other world,
Actor Studio?
Yeah, inside the Actor Studio, otherwise known as the Other World in the Echoes of the Eye. That it's really dark and you can't see anything. And I thought that was like a cool, what ended up kind of like being like a theme of the game was like the using light technology, and like sometimes the answer was to like turn the lights off. And like like I think that was cool, like the like things are hidden in the darkness. Thing is a cool visual theme. Like I think the game like is very visually themed because like you're discovering things, like you're seeing things. So like I thought that, I don't know, I just thought that was kind of like a cool symbolic mechanic.
Yeah. I liked the how like constant it is. I like that light is sort of like the operating mechanic of the game. I think it's really clever to make it something that you have had access to the entire base game, but used in a different way. And I do like also the theming of the fact that everything just sort of works on light. So you have like the elevators, the door locks, the airlock in the hangar as well. Like all those things are sort of operated by, at first you assume just your flashlight, but then having it go like as far as making the entire like what is essentially second half of the DLC set in an essentially lightless void where you have to like light candles and shit to see your way, was definitely cool and interesting. I just hate when a game is just like super, not always obviously, but like I found that having to repeat things, I'm unable to like memorize my steps in such a way that like when I restart something, I can't just like blindly run to the next area. I have to like slow walk with the fucking lantern to see things. So yeah, but I do like it as an idea. So
yeah,
I'm on board with that at least.
I like it's like it's intentional. So like I think it they do interesting things with it, in my opinion.
That's like the best word to use to describe like all of Outer Wilds, I think. It's just intentional.
Yeah.
They do not make decisions accidentally.
An area where it's just dark and hard to see unintentionally does suck ass.
Oh, true facts. Welcome to most games on the PlayStation 3.
Fucking what was it called? The Blair Witch game.
Oh god.
Where you couldn't see anything at all.
I've not played that again since, but it was a miserable experience when we did play that. Did you have I think I have like one other thing.
I feel like I had something that's just gone now from the brain. So you do your thing and we'll see if it comes back.
Fair enough. I was thinking about things that we typically talk about near the end of the podcast, and like this game adds, I think, a little bit of additional music. I do like the fact that whenever you're on the raft, even if it's for like a second and a half, it tries to play this like adventurous river rafting music.
Yeah.
Which was very cute. Like it's a song I like. But...
Oh yeah, dude, I think that song fucking slaps. It is like probably my favorite song in the entire game.
Dang. It does have that adventurous spirit.
Yeah, it's such a good theme. And yeah, you only get to hear it like little snippets at a time. There was like one section where I could get it going like fully, but like I was gonna request you put that one in as the mid-roll song.
If I had another option, I don't know what it would have been.
Yeah. But yeah, I love that song.
Yeah, that song rules. Glad that it's there.
The creepy Bayou Mansion music is also cool.
Okay, yeah. Maybe there is more. But I wanted to talk about visually. We already talked about the ring world is cool. I played Halo when I was a child, so I've had the experience before. It's always impressive. You like look up, see the thing go around. Super neat. Really loved it. I want to talk about the visual design of the owl deer people.
I've heard people call them the residents. I don't know if
like
we want to call them that.
Like that fucking art pop band that like bought 30-second ad spaces in like the 70s so that they could play full songs in those periods.
Yeah. Exactly like
in case anybody knows about that band, The Residents.
Yeah, or we can just call them like the Owl Guys. That's fine.
The Owl Guys. Yeah, no, I'll call them The Residents. I just never heard that. I don't. Their design is just like very cool to me. In a way that and this is showing, I think, more my aesthetic preference than it is any actual like thing. I don't really like the design of like the Hearthians that much. I think they look cartoony. I think they look like specifically something that would have come out on Cartoon Network between the years of like 2008 and 2014. Like that's the vibe I get from them. And the the residents are kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's really good. I like that they have a mouth, I think.
Yeah, they've got teeth.
That like opens where you don't think that it's going to.
I almost want to say it's kind of like a beak, but that also has like, it's like more wide and mouth-like and has teeth.
Right.
So, creepy.
It's creepy and horrifying. They cut an interesting silhouette. I think it's just a really good design, especially for something that's told in like the Viewmaster style.
Yeah. I like the Hearthians design personally. I like the whole game. I think has like a kind of a cartoony aesthetic that I think they fit pretty well. But I never was a big fan of the Nomai design. Personally, I think it looks kind of awkward. But yeah, I also agree. I like the residents design a lot. I like that they've got big antlers. Like I like how tall they are. That's one thing like I picked up on pretty early on is how like tables and chairs are all like bigger than they should be. So and there's like the increased gravity as well. So you're like, oh, we're dealing with like bigger creatures. So that's kind of like foreshadowed, which is cool. When the first time you see all the dead bodies is awesome. Like it's really spooky looking, all like the antlers, definitely feel like horror movie-esque. Yeah.
They're all just like clutching the artifacts.
Clutching their little artifacts. Yeah.
It's horrible.
Apparently like there was like intentional that they like kind of wanted to make it like a pseudo horror themed, for this DLC. And I think it was a perfect way to go. That sounds like the description of a horror movie, right? You find an abandoned space station and, like there's these like, seemingly dead aliens on there that are still alive in the fucking ship's computer. Like that sounds like an awesome horror movie, so yeah. And like the designs are great and they are, able, you said you didn't sympathize with them, but I think they give them enough like facial expressions and stuff to like when they need to be sympathized with, is that a word?
When they need to be sympathetic, maybe.
Like they can be. Like the prisoner.
And to be fair, I said I found it harder to empathize with them than with the Nomai, but But I mean, also, I think that's intentional to an extent, right?
Yeah.
Like the fact that they did make them into horror movie monsters is kind of is to dehumanize them before you learn more about them.
Yeah.
So I agree.
They contrast nicely with the Nomai as well.
Right. Yeah, if it had been more fucking Nomai shit, if it had been more of the same in terms of like you're finding more artifacts that like tell more of the story of the Nomai, I feel like it would have been kind of putting a hat on a hat. That it's like we kind of got everything that we needed to from the base game to understand the story. Focusing on something new was just the right decision, and I doubt that they humored any other ideas when they were developing this.
Yeah.
So.
Man, the first time you saw one in game, was that like the scariest shit ever? Like when one just grabs you?
It was, yeah.
Oh man, I think we talked about this weirdly on the David Schmansky games episode. Is it the Moon Sliver? The one where
that is a game
where you finish the maze at the end, and then there's like a guy behind you, and you have to like turn around and look at him. Like a game where you're like very isolated, and then you run across like another character in the world. Like even if it's not like a horror themed, can be like weirdly impactful and like weird. So yeah, used to great effect. Like it scared the crap out of me to run into like a wandering, fucking ghoul in the woods.
Yeah, I mean it's so rare that you run into any living thing in.
Yeah, that isn't like a monster, yeah, like a big fish or something. Yeah, like an actual like intelligent creature walking around.
Right. So yeah, it is absolutely terrifying, and like especially like, well, not especially, the opposite. I numbed the effect slightly on myself because the first time I got grabbed, I did just like sort of immediately blunder right into it. Like I was like, "What is that?" and like ran up to it. And was immediately killed for it. Man. Well, killed, shaken awake or whatever.
Woken up.
Yeah, so that was the jump scare was successful, but like I had no dread leading up to it, so it didn't like relieve any tension really. But then it was also more dreadful later because I knew what they were capable of. So you take it one way or the other. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess one last thing that I just thought about. This is just like a hypothetical, maybe to pick your brain a little. Might be interesting. It's like I was thinking, like while I was playing this DLC, every time waking up, jumping in the ship, flying to the stranger, trying to do more stuff. Like, I wonder if it ever like crossed their mind to like have to go to like a different planet to like get something and bring it to the stranger. Like I'm glad that they didn't do that. I feel like that could maybe get like, because like I feel like you would have had to design for that from the beginning. There'd have to be enough time to go to another planet and come back and like do all the shit that you needed to do. So it probably would have been more trouble than it's worth. But it's just something like I thought about, like that could have been interesting to kind of connect it a little more with the base game.
Yeah, I agree that it would have been interesting to have connected it, but also I would be furious if there was like a necessary item that I had to get from like Brittle Hollow and bring it back. Like I would have been like, I would have quit the game right there. Like there were parts of this game, like nearing the end, where honestly I'm getting kind of into final thoughts here, but like this would have exacerbated any feeling of frustration that I had if I had to like not just go to the one place, which is already huge. But I guarantee you are right. They definitely thought about that at some point.
Yeah.
Well, do we have residential thoughts?
My residential thoughts are, I'm glad that we decided to do this. Because, I wanted to play it when it came out, but I knew I wouldn't because we do this podcast and I'm already playing, 30 other games a year.
Exactly, yeah.
So, and as time went on, I think I kind of, forgot about it, essentially. And, I just feel like I never, ever would have played this if we didn't do it for the podcast. And I'm glad that we did because it is really good. Yeah, it got off on a bad foot for me the first time I booted it up because I had to, remember how everything worked. But once I got into it, it was awesome. We played Abduction recently, which is by the creators of Myst, and we were talking about I wish there was kind of a more accessible version of Myst. And I think we just completely overlooked that, I think Outer Wilds is that. I think it gives you a lot of similar, a really cool world to explore, like things that you have to like figure out by like just looking and observing the world, and like kind of cryptic puzzles that you have to like, you tap into your big brain to figure out. So yeah, and I had that kind of revelation while playing this. Like I'm doing all these crazy things. I'm actually able to figure them out myself, which is real satisfying. So yeah, I love the creativity. Like I love the ring world. Like I love that how this developer like Mobius Digital like works in like cool concepts. Like what if we had a ring world? That would be really hard to program, but we're gonna do it anyway. So yeah, I really like connect with that. Like I think like more games should have more like really awesome concepts in them like that. And yeah, a lot of cool little elements. I like how everything is controlled with lights. Like the light and darkness theme is interesting. Like the new enemies, like the residents, are an awesome design. I like that it's spooky. I think it really adds to and enhances the main game. Yeah, like there are definitely some frustrations as we talked about. Like, but for me, they really didn't matter that much. I had my rough points, but like I think the longer I played it, the less I cared about them personally. So overall, I came out pretty positive. When I was like in the middle of it, I was like, this is just better than the base game. And then my opinion like evened out on it. So yeah, I had a really good time with this. So, thumbs up from me.
Yeah. I'm so angry at you for bringing up abduction. I'm like doing like the frantic rewrites in the seconds before I get on.
Erasing.
Yeah. There was a thing I said on the abduction episode about getting to the first like alien world that I went to, and how I was like, this is like, in a weird way, this is like scarier than a lot of things that are purported to be horror games. Like just being in a vast, completely alien environment is a scary thing, even if the game isn't like sending monsters after you, right? Like, you aren't going to get killed by an alien in that game. And when I booted this game up and started playing it again, before I had even gotten to the stranger, I had that thought. I was like, fuck, dude, like this is kind of like why Outer Wilds is cool. And I spent a lot of shitty time on the original podcast not talking about just like the experience of floating through space, being isolated, not knowing what to do, and like ending up in a place that is completely different than you're used to. And I think it's because the game is about learning about and becoming familiar with those environments so that you can solve the puzzles, which can get kind of complicated. So you have to keep going back and back over and over and over again. And it becomes familiar. And that is like how we were operating when we did the podcast. We had just played the game for like 20 hours and we're very familiar with everything. And that feeling was distant in the rear view. Coming into the DLC, I was like, fucking hell, like this is crazy. All this stuff I got to explore and shit. And I had a similar experience to you, I think. Like there's a hump to get over, much like in Outer Wilds regular style. But then once you're in it, it's so fucking cool. And everything is so interesting and tickles your brain in that way that makes you want to keep going back in. And my complaint, honestly, like with the whole thing, and it mirrors my complaint with the original game so much, is that I just think that the ending is too involved and to me feels completely different than the experience that I had for the previous like 9 hours. Where I was having fun collecting information and like seeing all the stuff, and then I'm thrown into the like roguelike gauntlet of like going through this area over and over again to do the steps in the correct order. And I felt like it was less exploration and more just like trial and error. So I realized the game can't do without the secret world. The game that's a important, essential facet of the DLC. but it is a thing that like I was thinking like if like I have let fun become work. And if I was not on the podcast, I probably wouldn't have finished it. And it's weird that way. And I feel similarly about the base game. It's like, this is a game and a DLC that I both love and also would never finish if I didn't feel obligated to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's okay. I think that this experience can be for me, but just not the endings of them. Thank you for listening to NOCLIP this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, we're entering into our much anticipated new theme, which is 4 games that are named with women's names that start with an L. I know it's catchy. It rolls right off the tongue.
El Timber.
It's El Timber. And first, we're going to be talking about Lorelei, a point-and-click adventure game. And if you thought that there were more words in that title, just wait. But it's a point-and-click adventure game by the developer Harvester Games, who did The Cat Lady, a game that we talked about very long in the past now.
Yeah, we are big fans of The Cat Lady, so it's been on our radar for a while. And yeah, all the games have a woman's name that start with L in them, and they all have like a similar kind of vibe to them as well. Just like a weird coincidence that we noticed. They're like, well, we have to do a theme month now.
Yep, now we're gonna do all of them. So look out for that. And until that time, you can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com. There you can find links to our Twitter account, our email address, the Discord where we talk about the games and people suggest games for us to play, the YouTube channel, and all of our old episodes, including episodes that we did on The Outer Wilds.
Abduction.
Tunic. Yeah, The Cat Lady. Not related to this one. Related to the next one. So yeah, check those out. And smash your ship into that like button, and then just leave it for dead.
Flip through those slideshows in the comment section. And don't let the Century see you, or do let the Century see you, so it can ring that bell.
That's the best one, and we saved it for last for that reason.
Totally intentionally.
Fully intentionally. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah. All right.